more accomplished if everyone just stay muted until it's time for, I guess, answering questions or you want us to respond to something. So welcome. We're glad to have you all again and glad to be enjoying you all again this year.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so this program is going to be sponsored by Miss Anita Davis. So thank you so much to Miss Anita Davis. And it is so nice to see you guys. Booker T. Washington, hope you are doing great today. We are about to have an awesome, lively science program with lots of animals. So Mr. Steven is going to be hosting the program, and I am behind the camera. My name is Miss Keesha. So, all right, here we go.
All right. Hi guys, how you doing? Good afternoon. Before we get too far, I just want to make sure thumbs up at the camera, please, so Miss Keesha can see if you guys can hear me, if my volume is good, if I'm coming across. Just want to make sure before we get too far that everyone can hear. We got thumbs up, Keesha? Okay. Excellent. All right. Always want to check that beforehand. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon. As Keesha said, my name is Steven. I'm one of the educators here at the Museum of Discovery. I do shows, programs, demos, all that kind of stuff. And one of my absolute favorite things to talk about and learn about is animals. I absolutely love animals and nature. And so that's why I love doing these animal programs. And I'm really excited that I'm going to be with you guys for the next few weeks learning all about animals. We have a really cool animal collection here at the museum. And our animal collection actually represents basically the entire world in one form or another. We have animals that are native to Africa, animals that are native to Asia, South America, Australia, but we also have animals that are local, some animals at home from North America, and specifically from right here in our home state of Arkansas. We love talking about Arkansas animals because Arkansas actually has a lot of really cool ecosystems all in one state that supports a lot of different kinds of plants and animals. We obviously have a lot of water here. We have rivers and floodplains, but we also have really tall hills and even some mountains. We have forests. We have some really hot, almost desert-like areas, lakes. And so our state actually supports a lot of really varied wildlife. And so today I have 4 different Arkansas animals for you guys, 4 animals that you could actually find not too far outside your backyard, maybe even in your backyard, depending on where you live. They're all a little different. They all have cool things about them, and we're going to meet them up close and personal. I'll be talking to you a lot in this wide shot, but Miss Keesha also has a close-up camera that she's going to use to get some shots of our animals and close-up looks that you guys honestly probably wouldn't be able to see if we were in person. So I'm really excited. Now, our first animal that we're going to start with, this one you might not want to be as close up to, but I think that she is a really, really cool animal. And it would be hard to talk about Arkansas animals without talking about one of our best creepy crawlies. So Miss Keisha's definitely going to need to switch to the close-up cam for this one because this is our smallest animal. I like to start small and work our way up. And so I'm going to get her out here. Hello. She is ready to come meet everybody. All right. And our first animal, like I said, we are starting off with the creepy crawly. We are going to meet Harry. Now, Harry is our brown tarantula. I've also heard them called chocolate tarantulas. And brown tarantulas are the most common tarantula that we have here in Arkansas. There's a few of them. If you didn't know that before and you're not a fan of spiders, maybe you're not so happy that you've learned that. But we have a few different kinds of tarantulas here in Arkansas. And even if you find them kind of gross and creepy, they are extremely important to our environment. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about it while we check out Harry, nice, close, and personal. I can see that Keesha doesn't really want to get up close to Harry herself, but she's very brave, so she's going to go for it. So like I said, Harry is a brown tarantula. Tarantulas are a very special kind of spider. Now, when you think of a spider, you might think of the kind of small ones, or maybe not so small, that hang out in your house. Maybe they surprise you in your bathroom. Maybe they build webs up in the corner. Tarantulas are a little bit different. They're obviously very large and very heavy-bodied spiders. So even though Harry here can spin webs, she doesn't really hang out on webbing like other spiders. She's a bit too heavy for that. What these guys do is they like to have little burrows where they hang out, and they put webbing down in front of the burrow. Now, what that does is it allows them to sense when prey walks by. So Harry is covered in hair, as you can see, hence the name. And that hair has a few different uses. One of the main uses that Harry has for her hair is that when things walk across her web in front of her burrow or anything like that, she can feel that. She can feel the vibrations and the movements in her hairs, and that lets her know that it's time to strike. If prey walks by in front of her burrow and she feels it, she's going to leap out, grab onto it, and sink her fangs into it. Harry is a venomous spider. She does kill her prey with venom. Now, obviously, to someone my size, I'm not the size of a cricket, which is something she'd normally be eating. That venom is not going to be harmful to me, but it would produce a pretty painful bite. So I always want to make sure that I'm handling Harry very respectfully and that she's not feeling agitated. So that venom is going to do its work and kill her prey, and then she's going to suck all the delicious cricket juices out of the cricket that she just caught. Now, that is actually one of the ways that tarantulas are really important to our ecosystem. They love to eat lots of bugs. And if you guys know anything about bugs, you know that there are a lot of them out there. So if there weren't animals like tarantulas and spiders and scorpions and centipedes, things that we find a little bit gross, there would be way more other bugs out and about in the world. And those other bugs would probably eat too many of the plants and other foods that other animals need to survive. So these guys actually help keep those bug populations under control. So even though we find them a little bit weird and a little bit freaky, they actually play a very important, if kind of gross, role in the ecosystem. Now, people always ask, and I'm sure with Harry and our last animal, I'm going to get the question, aren't you afraid of her biting you? Well, here's the thing. Harry hasn't been with us for a super long time. She's still a pretty young tarantula, but in the time that we've had her, we've tried to get her used to being handled and held. We've tried to get her used to being in front of lots of people and handled by lots of different people. And so, like any other animal, tarantulas can get used to being interacted with and held. And so she's actually done a really great job becoming a really great education animal for us. She still needs a little bit of work. She's still a little bit skittish in certain times, but I think she's doing a fantastic job just hanging out with all of us. So a little bit creepy crawly. I'm sorry we started off like that, but Arkansas, quite honestly, is a state full of creepy crawlies. So we wouldn't be talking about Arkansas animals if I didn't show you something that might make your skin crawl a little bit, although I hope you, at the very least, appreciate them. Now, at the end of the program, we will have time for questions. You guys can ask me questions about any of the animals that we're going to see. But right now, I got to move on to our second animal. And this animal is going to be one that is very near and dear to me. One of my absolute favorite kind of animals. And Arkansas is fantastic for these guys. Now, this type of animal, I'm actually going to have to put on some gloves to handle it for a very special reason we'll talk about. They have very sensitive skin. So I'm going to put on some gloves here and see if he's going to be cool just kind of sitting in this little pot of dirt. Our next friend, his name is Piglet. I actually don't know if he's ever done a program before. So we're going to try and get him used to being out and socializing. So thank you guys for wanting to do this program, because this is going to be really good for Piglet. Ooh, there you go, buddy. All right. I think we're going to be good. Let's see. All right. Keesha, is that going to be an all right shot for you? All right, guys. So everyone say hello to our second animal. This is Piglet. And Piglet is a dwarf American toad. Now, frogs and toads are amphibians, which means that they spend part of their life on the land and part of their life in the water. And being that we live in a state that gets a lot of water, we have a really cool variety of frogs and toads. So one of these guys is obviously the dwarf American toad, like Piglet here. And these guys are really, really cool. And one of the things that I really like about these guys is that each frog and toad, not just in Arkansas, but all across the world, has their own specific call. We're coming up on spring. Around April to about June or July is the perfect time to hear frog calls outside. And I bet you that you guys have heard plenty of frog calls in your life, even if you didn't know that that's what's going on. Because during the spring months, that's when frogs and toads are trying to get a date. So when you are out and about during the springtime, you'll hear lots of animals calling back and forth, and that is male frogs or toads calling out and seeing if there's any ladies who might be interested. And so each one of them has their own specific call, and you can actually learn to tell which frogs are calling just by memorizing those calls. So we're going to learn one right now. Dwarf American toads have a call that kind of sounds like almost like a flute. They call it a trill. It's a very high-pitched kind of warbling sound. I won't do it too loud because I don't want to blow out the microphone, but it's kind of like a Keisha's trying not to laugh as she's watching me do this. So if you ever hear something sounding like that out in the wild, that's going to be a dwarf American toad like Piglet here, seeing if any ladies are interested in being his girlfriend. Now, one of the things that I want to highlight is the difference between frogs and toads. They're very closely related, kind of like turtles and tortoises, but you can tell a frog from a toad by a few key differences in how they look. So toads, like Piglet here, he's getting very excited. Toads like Piglet here have very warty skin, and their skin isn't usually very wet. So that's one easy way to tell frogs and toads apart. Also, toads like to spend their time on land. It's kind of like tortoises in the tortoise and turtle split. These guys like to spend their time on land, whereas frogs and turtles, since we're going with that, like to spend most of their time in the water. And frogs have very smooth skin, and their skin's usually kind of wet. I'm going to actually put Piglet away here just because he's getting a little bit antsy. So everyone say goodbye to Piglet, but I'm going to keep talking about him for just a little bit. And frogs and toads' skin are actually really, really important to them. There's a reason I was wearing gloves to handle these guys, and that's because frogs and toads actually breathe partly through their skin. Their skin is very porous. It has a lot of kind of ways that they can absorb water and oxygen. And our hands as humans are kind of gross, to be honest. Even as much as we are washing and sanitizing them during this time, our hands are still kind of gross. And so if I have any gross, nasty bacteria or anything that might interfere with Piglet's skin, I definitely want to be wearing gloves so that I don't get him sick. So that's why you saw me kind of handling him very gently with those gloves. So I love talking about frogs and toads because they're super important here in Arkansas. Again, they're going to eat bugs like those tarantulas. And I just think it's fun to hear the chorus outside. All right, so for our next animal, this one you might have actually seen on your own. These guys are fairly common, not only in Arkansas, but all across the U.S., and they're pretty easy to see because they're very slow. So everyone, please say hello to my friend Legolas. Now, Legolas is our three-toed box turtle. And just like with frogs and toads, we have a lot of water here in Arkansas. And so we have a lot of turtles because they love to be near the water. Except with Legolas, she's actually a little bit special, a little bit unique. If you have ever seen a turtle before, you've probably found it near a lake or a river. But if you guys are looking at Legolas right now, you might be thinking that she looks a lot more like a tortoise. She doesn't really look like those turtles that you would find in the water. Three-toed box turtles and their close cousins, ornate box turtles, which are much more rare here, are kind of a fun, weird, special exception. They're a little bit different than other turtles. These guys, even though they are turtles, are built much more like tortoises. Legolas does not like to swim. She's good at sinking, not swimming. And so she's a turtle that spends most, if not all of her life on the land. She'll still find kind of wet, muddy spots to hang out in, but for the most part, you're going to find her scooting around, maybe on the forest floor or maybe across the road. Now, if you've ever seen these guys up close, I would bet that you haven't seen one like Legolas with her head sticking out and her legs sticking out, showing off to you guys. Legolas has been with us for several years. She's very used to being held. She's very used to being shown off, and she's getting used to virtual programming. So she is not afraid of us, and she's kind of always got her head and legs out. However, if you were to find one in the wild, I would almost guarantee that they would be showing you why they call them box turtles. So unlike some other turtles, box turtles can't just pull their legs and their head into their shell. They can actually fully close up their shell. If you look at the bottom of Legolas's shell here, this is called her plastron. You'll notice this kind of line going across here. And this is basically like a door hinge. So when you close the door, that's the part of the door that's attached to the wall. When Legolas pulls her arms, her legs, and her head in, she can actually close that hinge and essentially fully shut herself inside her shell. Hence why they call them box turtles, because they can put themselves into their box. This gives them almost unparalleled protection from other animals. That's why turtles and tortoises have shells. What's the point of having a shell? Keeping yourself safe from predators. So this incredibly thick and tough shell is actually made of bony plates, and this makes it so that it's really hard for any predator to bite or scratch through them. So even though their shells are really big and really bulky, and it does make certain things very difficult, it gives them a level of protection that not many other animals have. Where are you going? Now, some people think that turtles and tortoises can climb out of their shells, but I promise you, if that were to happen to Legolas here, something would be very, very wrong. Because, like I said, those shells are actually made of bony plates, and not only are they made of bony plates, they're actually part of their skeleton. If you were to ever look at the inside of a turtle or tortoise's shell, you would see that their spine, their backbone, just like you guys have, is actually attached to, fused to the back part of their shell. So they can't leave their shell because it's a part of them, but that's okay because it basically functions as not only a mobile home, but as a suit of armor. Now, Legolas in particular has a very interesting story. One of the reasons that I really like to bring her out, not only is she an excellent example of an Arkansas animal, but she also is a really good example of some of the cool backstories that animals here at the museum have. It's kind of sad, but I think that it has a happy ending. Now, we call her a three-toed box turtle because typically this kind of turtle has 3 toes on their back foot. However, if you will look at Legolas's back foot, you'll notice that she's got all of 1 toe between her 2 feet, much less 3 on 1 foot. Legolas has been through a lot. We're not actually sure what happened to her, but someone found her outside. They think she might have gotten hit by a car because a whole back part of her shell was broken and dented, and she was missing several of her toes, which is not a good thing, obviously, for her trying to survive out in the wild. But luckily, someone found her, brought her in. I believe Game and Fish found her, and they sent her our way once she was better, once she was rehabilitated. And so even though she wouldn't be able to survive out in the wild, we're able to give her food, shelter, water, and a really good life. And in return, she does educational programs like this for us, and she's one of our more popular animals. So just a good example of kind of the really cool, interesting stories that some of our animals have here. All right, I'm looking forward to see if you guys have any questions about Legolas. But before we do that, I have one more animal to show you. This animal will be a reptile, just like Legolas here. So scales, the whole shebang. Except just like with our tarantula, some of you might not be super happy to see this animal. However, I couldn't possibly talk about Arkansas animals without talking about snakes. Now, here in Arkansas, we have about 36 species of snakes. That's a lot of species of snakes. I'm from Illinois. I've maybe seen 2 whole snakes in my life up there. It's a little too cold for them. Down here in Arkansas, we've got snakes coming out of our ears. So we have about 36 species of snakes, and about 6 of those are venomous. 6 of those are pretty dangerous snakes. We have the cottonmouth, the copperhead. We have 3 different kinds of rattlesnakes: the pygmy rattlesnake, the western diamondback rattlesnake, and the timber rattlesnake. And the most venomous of all, but also probably the prettiest, is the Texas coral snake, those red, yellow, and black striped snakes. And so having some kind of dangerous snakes, a lot of people that I've met from Arkansas are understandably a little bit nervous, a little bit wary around snakes because they've been taught to be suspicious of snakes. However, even if they are suspicious of snakes, even if they're scared of snakes, I can usually always get them on board with our last animal, because this snake is not only one of the most well-known snakes here in Arkansas, but it's got a really cool thing that really kind of gets people on board. So give me just a second, and I'm going to get him out. He is very excited to see everybody, and he is absolutely one of my favorites to hold. Hello. Also extremely pretty, in my opinion. All right. Everyone say hello to Spotty, our speckled king snake. Now, there's a pretty good chance that some of you already know about this snake, and some of you may have even found this snake before. We actually found a baby speckled king snake right outside the museum. We have a river that runs right past us, which attracts a lot of different animals, and that's a-okay for speckled king snakes, because speckled king snakes have a really wide diet. These guys are hungry snakes. They eat kind of the standard snake things that you think about: mice, rats, small rodents, all that kind of stuff. They'll eat lizards. They might go for a bird if they can catch it. They might eat eggs. But there's a reason that even people that don't like snakes kind of like speckled king snakes, and there's a reason that they're called king snakes. They have a story behind that name. One of a king snake's absolute favorite foods is other snakes. That's probably why we found the speckled king snake outside the museum. Water attracts lots of different snakes. We have several kinds of water snakes here in Arkansas. And so speckled king snakes see places like that as an excellent opportunity to find their favorite food. Not only do these guys really like eating other snakes, these guys are actually able to eat some venomous snakes. So things that we have here, like copperheads and cottonmouths, that we're usually kind of afraid of because they can be dangerous, these guys make a meal out of those snakes. Not only can they hunt them and kill them, they're actually even immune to some venomous snake bites. I'm not exactly sure which ones, but that might be a good thing for you guys to research on your own after our presentation. But I do know that if certain venomous snakes bite them, they're not even going to be affected by that venom. That's usually the killing blow for these guys. So they really earn that title king snakes by being the top of even the snake food chain. And that's why I think they're one of the coolest snakes that we have here, and I can usually get people on board. A lot of people like to say that they kill the bad snakes, but of course those venomous snakes aren't bad. They're just doing what they need to do to survive, and they have their own adaptations for getting their food. But I do think it's really cool that even those top predators have something that eats them. I also just think that these guys are one of the most beautiful snakes that we have here in Arkansas. Obviously, they earned that speckled part of their speckled king snake name. Almost every single one of their scales on their back has a spot in it. And then, of course, a lovely kind of greenish yellow pattern on the back. A lot of people ask why a lot of snakes have two very different colors and patterns on their backs and on their bellies. Usually, snakes have some sort of darker colors or colors that blend in with their environment on their back, as well as a pattern that blends in with something like leaves or dirt or rocks, because that helps them camouflage. It helps them keep themselves safe from other animals. Even speckled king snakes, which is with as many other kinds of animals as they like to eat, they still need to be safe from things like hawks or other coyotes or something like that, something that still might make a meal out of these guys. So that's usually why you'll see the back of a snake is very patterned and usually a darker color. However, they don't really have to worry about their belly being camouflaged because that's touching the ground. So usually snakes have a much lighter color and a different pattern on their belly. One of the things that I really like about bringing out Spotty is that his belly really shows off the different kinds of scales these guys have on their bodies. Obviously, all along the back, you can see lots of little scales all very close together. But then on the belly, these very wide rectangular scales, because of course, snakes don't have legs to walk around with. So these wide scales on the belly actually kind of work like the treads of a tire or the bottoms of your shoes. They help them get traction, help them get grip on the ground as they slither along. Because as you can imagine, getting around without feet presents its own challenges. That being said, getting around without feet does make these guys very well adapted to do certain things. They're really good at climbing because they can use their bodies to kind of wrap around trees and branches. And also, these guys have really strong muscles all over their bodies. Obviously, they need those muscles to get around. Obviously, they need those muscles to climb. But also, Spotty here, even though he can eat venomous snakes, he is not a venomous snake himself. So the way that he's going to kill his prey is he's going to grab onto it with his sharp teeth, and then he's going to wrap around it and squeeze it to death. He's what we call a constrictor snake. He constricts his prey. So he'll grab onto a mouse or a rat or maybe even another snake, wrap around it very quickly and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze until that other animal is dead. And then once that's all done, snakes don't exactly have the best table manners. These guys do not chew their food, they actually swallow it whole. And they can eat things that are a lot larger than their heads because they have very specialized jaws that allow them to kind of unhook, stretch out, and swallow whatever they're trying to eat. Now, they actually don't eat very often. These guys here at the museum only eat about once a week. And snakes out in the wild can potentially go even months without eating, depending on how big of a meal they get. So even though these guys are excellent predators, they're not necessarily always on the hunt for food. Usually they're probably just trying to keep themselves safe. And occasionally they're going to get hungry and they need to go looking for something. So I'm really glad that I got to meet you guys virtually and talk about some of our best Arkansas animals. I love all these guys, particularly the speckled king snake. I think they're really fantastic and one of the coolest snakes among the many that we have here in Arkansas. And so I'm really excited to see what kind of questions you guys have. Feel free to ask questions about any of the animals that you've seen or any other Arkansas animals you may have questions about. Miss Keesha is back behind the computer and she's going to help facilitate this little Q&A portion. And once again, we'd really like to thank Anita Davis for sponsoring these programs. We're going to meet a lot more awesome animals and see some crazy cool stuff. So I'm really excited that we're doing this series with you guys. I'm going to leave Spotty out while we're answering some questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. So curious. Hi.
All right, guys, if you have a question, you can just raise your hand and I will call on you.
Got a little snake bracelet going. It's the new fashion.
All right. Okay. Deshawn, you have a question? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Are some tadpoles poisonous?
Are some tadpoles poisonous?
Ooh, That's a very interesting
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
All right. Steven.
That is a great question. So tadpoles, just in case you guys don't know, are of course the baby forms of frogs and toads. They spend their lives in the water. And that's actually a really interesting question because we know that some frogs and toads can be poisonous. Obviously, there's poison dart frogs, but even like the frogs and toads that we have here, you guys might have seen on the close-up shots of Piglet that right behind his eyes, he has kind of these big bumps. And those are actually glands, special kind of parts of his body that actually help produce poison. Now, it's not really going to do anything if I hold him, but if something were to try and eat him, he would taste really, really bad. So, as adults, there are definitely frogs and toads, even here in Arkansas, that are poisonous. However, as tadpoles, as babies, I don't think that those poisonous glands are developed. So I don't believe that there are any tadpoles that are poisonous. However, that's the great thing about learning about animals. There's always an exception, and I'm always ready to be proved wrong. So I'll definitely do some research on that and figure out if there are any poisonous tadpoles. But that's a great question. All right.
All right. Good question.
Spotty liked that question too.
Let's see. How about Emmanuel?
How do you tame all the animals?
How do you tame all the animals?
What a fantastic question. So, especially when I hold things like snakes and tarantulas, people always want to know how I'm doing this and how I'm not getting bitten. Just like dogs and cats, many different animals can be trained to be used to people holding them and used to people moving them and showing them off. And so all the animals that you guys have seen are very used to being handled. Some of them have been with us for a few years, and so they know the drill. That being said, newer animals like Piglet, you saw he's very antsy. We have another snake named Maddie who's only been here for a couple years, and she's still a little bit nervous about being handled. And so it's just a constant kind of process training these guys to get them used to being handled. However, there are still cases because just like humans, animals have their own unique individual personalities. So you guys saw me handling Harry, our brown tarantula, obviously, and he's not even our best tarantula for being held. That would be Miss Rosie, our Chilean rose-haired tarantula. But we have another tarantula, our Mexican red knee tarantula, and I don't know her name because she does not like to be held. She likes to stay in her enclosure. She likes to stay in her log. She likes that we throw her crickets every once in a while, and she does not want anything else to do with people. And we've had her for years. So you can be the best animal trainer and you can get them lots of exposure, but sometimes an animal just doesn't want to hang out. They don't really like doing that. And of course, we don't make those animals do anything we don't want to. So that is a fantastic question. I always love when people ask me something like that.
All right. How about Leona? Did I say your name right? Leona?
Why do snakes have shapes on them?
Why do snakes have shapes on them?
Why do snakes have shapes on
That
them?
is a great question. So usually snakes have patterns and shapes on them to help them blend in with their environment. So animals that are all kind of one color, even if that color blends in with their environment, they still kind of stand out because you're like, huh, that's that weird strip of one color. However, patterns and dots and splotches and stripes help kind of break up the snake's body. And so it makes them a little bit harder to see. It makes it a little bit harder for predators and prey to visualize exactly where that snake or that animal is. And that isn't just limited to snakes. Other animals have that too. There's a reason that tigers have stripes. It helps them break up their body and kind of blend in better in the forests. That being said, there are some snakes where their patterns are meant to warn other animals. For example, we talked about coral snakes. They have extremely bright colors and a very distinct pattern that does not blend in with anything. But they're letting other animals know that they are dangerous and they shouldn't be messed with. So rather than blending in, they actually stand out, and in a weird way, that helps keep them safe. So I love talking about animal, not just snake, patterning and coloration, because it has lots of cool uses for those guys keeping themselves safe. Great question.
Okay. So next I'm going to pick Kennedy. She's had her hand up for a long time. You can unmute yourself, Kennedy.
Are snakes scared of the sun when they go outside?
Are snakes scared of the sun when they go outside?
That's an interesting question. I will say that different snakes are awake at different times of the day. Some snakes like to be awake when the sun is out. Some snakes like to be awake when it's dark. Some snakes don't mind being out in the open, and there are some snakes that really prefer to be hidden under things or even under dirt and rocks, like underground. So I would say that it depends on the kind of snake. That being said, most animals that are small, and I know that Spotty looks pretty big compared to other animals, but compared to some other animals, he's small, don't like being out in the open because that's a really easy way to get picked up as somebody's meal. For example, speckled king snakes, one of the things that eats them the most is going to be birds of prey, hawks, owls, and things like that. And being out in the open, out in the sunlight, is a great way to get picked up by a hawk. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're afraid of the sun. It would be more that they're afraid of being out in the open and potentially being on the menu for something bigger than them.
All right. So Cordero, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I think we have a time for a couple more.
Okay, we have like 2 more.
Fantastic questions so far.
Oh, I couldn't hear you. Sorry, Cordero. I think your microphone is not working. Maybe tell your teacher and she can translate it to me.
We've got a secret question.
What's your question? I'll translate for him.
Thank you.
How long can a snake live?
Ooh,
How
what a
long
great
Was
can a
question.
Cordero's
snake live?
question.
That's a great
Right, thank
question.
you.
It can vary depending on the snake. Some snakes live longer, some snakes don't live as long. However, for most snakes, the blanket answer that I give is about 20, maybe 30 years. That seems to be how long a lot of snakes live, 20 to 30 years. And that's what I would say for Spotty here. And he's still got a lot of time left. I believe he's about 7 years old. So we'll have Spotty for quite a long time. But yes, usually the standard answer is about 20 to 30 years.
Okay, and then one last question. I'm going to pick Renaya. You've had your hand up for a while.
How can you?
Oh, I can hear you. You can go.
How can you train snake?
How can you train a snake? Was that your question?
Yeah.
How can you train a snake?
So there are a few ways that we make sure that our snakes like Spotty here feel comfortable being handled for educational programs. One, we keep them well fed. We make sure that they're not hungry because a hungry animal is usually not a happy animal. So of course, we make sure that these guys are well fed, a healthy diet. Number 2, we again handle them a lot, get them very used to lots of human presence, lots of different people holding them. And 3, the biggest thing is making sure that we really pay attention to how these guys are feeling. A snake is going to let you know if it's unhappy. It's going to hiss. It's going to move in weird ways. It's going to strike with its head. And so if you were to go ahead and pick up a snake that's showing you that it's angry, it's probably going to bite you. So if I ever go to pick up Spotty and he's not in a good mood, I'm just going to leave him in his tank and go get another animal because, of course, we don't want these guys to feel threatened, and we don't want to make them do anything they don't want to do. I also make sure when I'm holding any snake that I am very gentle with them. You can see I just kind of let Spotty move around in my hands, and I give him lots of support, but I make sure that he's always able to move. I don't squeeze him, I don't grab him hard, and I never grab his face, because if I'm grabbing at his face, I might as well be a predator. So these are all things, not just with snakes, but with any animal, that kind of help the training process and getting them used to everything. So thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon. If you had any questions I couldn't get to, please tell your teachers. They can email me or Miss Beth, and I will try and get them answered to the best of my abilities. I am really excited to be doing this series with you guys and to be showing you guys more animals. So until next time, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you guys with some more animals next week, I believe. So thank you guys so much, and have a great afternoon. All of our animals say bye.
Bye. During
Thank
the
you
day
guys. Mrs. Smith, do you have?
What about tomorrow? Bye. Bye.
I'm sorry.
Did
Could
you
you
have
repeat your
anything you
question?
needed to say before we logged out?
Oh, no, ma'am. We enjoyed the session. Thank you all so much. We definitely appreciate
All
it.
Excellent.
right.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.